With great power comes great responsibility.
Compromise where you can. Where you can't, don't. Even if everyone is telling you that something wrong is something right. Even if the whole world is telling you to move. It is your duty to plant yourself like a tree, look them in the eye and say no. You move.
Never step onto the battlefield of ideas unprepared. Before you enter the fray, you need a plan. And there's no better place to get one than right here on Tactics with host Caleb Colquitt. The Situation Room goes live now on News Radio 1440.
And good evening. Welcome in, everybody. Thank you for being with us here on Tactics, where tolerance isn't love, speech isn't hate. Well, I messed up my own motto. Sorry about that. It's been a long day, been a long week. Welcome into Tactics, whether you're joining us on YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, Periscope, however you're joining us. We do appreciate you being with us here on the Tactics program. I don't know why, I just lost my train of thought. The way that the motto goes is that where speech isn't speech isn't violence, tolerance isn't love, and disagreement isn't hatred. So twice now, I've screwed up my own motto for the show. But yeah, that's the kind of week that it's been. But there's a lot going on here, and if you find your week thus far frustrating and irksome and something that you really just want to take a minute to escape, I'm sorry, this is not going to be that show for you. I wish that it could be. I like to occasionally do some lighthearted stuff. I like to occasionally sort of try to bring your spirits up. I don't think that that's going to happen this episode. I'm sorry. I'll try to do something more along those lines tomorrow or maybe Thursday, but today is not the day for that. I will tell you one really cool story before we sort of bring you down. I did see one really cool story. There's a kid that went to the Ohio State Fair. He's a 7th grader. So middle school kid goes to the Ohio State Fair and he is showing a couple of different animals. This is a farm kid involved in 4-H, FFA, and he winds up winning about $15,000 in prize money. State Fair's a very big deal up there. Winds up taking away total about $15,000 in prize money, donates all of it to St. Jude Children's Hospital. So props to that young man. That's just the feel-good story of the day. I'll go ahead and give you that one because I wish that the rest of my news stories were that good. I'm sorry, they're just not. But just because it's not good doesn't mean you don't need to know about it. In fact, I know that the reason that a lot of you guys watch this show, the reason that y'all are here is because you want to be informed, you want to be awake, and you want to know, good or bad, what's going on in the world. And unfortunately, this happens to be a day where there's an awful lot of bad. But we're going to give you the hardest-hitting political commentary to help you understand it. And one, that it's not even necessarily morally evil, it's just super, super obnoxious that this is still a debate that is happening, and partly because of the context in which it takes place, is the big toll bridge debate that is going on in our own home state of Alabama. Now, this one primarily affects the people of Mobile. So, for those of you that are listening to me, I know that most of my audience is in Montgomery, but for the rest of you that are scattered across the great state of Alabama, this is going to be something that is relevant primarily to your neighbors in Mobile. If you ever go down to Mobile, if you do any business there, this probably will affect you as well. But the Bayway Bridge that has been talked about, has been touted for a long time, they are going to be putting it together soon. They've already got some models, and you can actually go online and look up. I think that the local station down there, Fox 10, actually had an article about this really cool animation to show what the bridge is going to look like, how it's going to function, how to work with the existing roadways there. So that's a really cool resource if you're interested, especially if you're in the city of Mobile. I recommend looking at that. But the Bayway Bridge, which is going to be a part of I-10, the big source of contention over the past several months is that the earliest reports have shown that it's going to be a toll bridge. And according to the most recent reports, they vary a little bit in how much they say that the toll is going to have to be. but it could range anywhere from $4 to $6. And by the way, that's one way. That's not like you get to cross and then you get to come back. That's $6. So if you commute on this thing, if you drive to work using the Bayway Bridge, that's going to be $12 a day just to get to work. And what's hilarious about this, and this is something that is true of toll bridges. Heck, the tollway right here in Montgomery. Now, granted, I don't use it anymore because I've got the new studio. But back when I was living in Millbrook and driving into the News Radio 1440 studio every day, I contemplated, because my house was not far from the toll road, using the toll road. And I tried every single way that I could come up with, both for work and also for church, since I go to church at the Dalrated Church of Christ, which the bridge would have been a lot shorter. There's just no way economically to justify it. The toll is so high that any money that I would save on gas or any time is simply not worth it. And I think that based on, I mean, good gracious, $4 to $6 per trip, per one way, that's absurd. Very few people are going to be able to go across it. And this is really the issue that you're going to run into. Now, granted, I am speaking somewhat out of ignorance, but I'm going off of the authority of those that I trust in addressing this particular part of the issue. A lot of the people that I know from the Mobile area that have talked to me about this thing, they're saying that it is primarily going to affect those that are living outside the city and coming in. So if I'm wrong on this, look, I'm just going off of what others have told me, so I'm giving that disclaimer right now. If I'm wrong, feel free to correct me on Twitter at Tactics Radio. Oh, other hand, that one right there. At Tactics Radio. Feel free to tweet me and let me know that this is not going to be the case. But from what I've heard and people that live in that area, it's primarily going to affect more of the affluent community, the ones that have a lot more money and the ones that are commuting in. And this is going to primarily target them because the people that are living in the city that don't have the money to move to the suburbs and commute every day, they're not really going to be affected by it because they're already in Mobile. And it's not going to affect the average Alabamian because, let's face it, Mobile's a larger area population-wise, but it's not the only place where there are Alabamians. This isn't going to be a road that's going to affect most of us in Huntsville or Montgomery or Tuscaloosa or Auburn. It's just not. And so primarily the people that are going to be footing the bill for this are when I say wealthy, I don't even necessarily mean like top 10%. I'm talking about primarily upper middle class people, because the middle class commuters that go in, they're not going to be able to afford the tolls. It's going to be more economical for them to spend more money to drive around than it would be to pay the toll. Even though it would save them a lot of time in the process, they're just not going to be able to afford it. It's not worth it to them. So that's just going off of what I've heard from other people. So our fearless leader, Governor Ivey, went on one of our sister stations here at News Radio 1440, our Birmingham affiliate, Talk 99.5 with Matt Murphy. And she went on there this morning to defend the toll. She said, first of all, that the cost of doing nothing is too high. I don't really understand that one, and I would have loved to have been in the booth there with Kay Ivey and Matt to ask her, well, what exactly do you mean by that? What do you mean the cost of doing nothing? What is the cost of doing nothing? Have you done a study on that? Is this going to somehow cost us money if we don't build the bridge? Like, what exactly is it that you're saying the cost of doing nothing is too high? Because that sounds very scary and saying, well, if we don't build the bridge, then something terrible is going to happen. It's going to cost us more money in the long run. Okay, well, if that is true, that's fine. I need to see the numbers on it. I can't just take it on your word that the cost of nothing is going to be too high. Show me some facts and figures of what not having the bridge is going to cost us. I'm not saying that I absolutely know for a fact that what Governor Ivey is saying here is wrong. I'm saying that I've not seen the evidence to back it up. And until that happens, I have to assume that it's not true. Maybe it is, but she's going to have to prove herself to me. The burden of proof is squarely upon her, because it seems what is going on here is that Kay Ivey is engaged in a false dichotomy fallacy. That she's saying essentially your options are a $6 toll or not building a bridge, doing absolutely nothing about the traffic problem. Well, there may be other options. You're presenting a false dichotomy there. Maybe we can build the bridge and there's a way for it to not have a toll. Or maybe we just don't build the bridge and build something else that's going to cost less money. There are several other possible options. Right now, you're presenting it as a false dichotomy when there are several other paths that you could take set before you. And this is really where she goes into depth. This is Governor Kay Ivey saying, nobody wants to pay for anything. We just always want the benefits. If someone has got a better idea of what the toll should be, or if we should never toll, everybody would be for not having to have a toll. That's an oddly worded sentence. I just haven't found the option yet. It's the reason we're hosting the meeting with the state legislators, congressional delegation, constitutional officers, and have all been invited to come and be specific to offer some reasonable solutions of how we can pay for the bridge without using a toll or a lower toll. So a couple things that you need to notice about that statement. First of all, you'll notice that at the end of that, she kind of finishes it off by saying, reasonable solutions of how we can pay for the bridge without a toll or a lower toll. In other words, what she is saying is, oh, the bridge is happening. It's just a question of how we're going to pay for it. Why is the assumption that the bridge must happen? This is the problem with everything out of Kay Ivey's mouth past this point in that interview, is that it's all coming from the perspective, it's all coming from the idea that, oh, the bridge is not optional. Not only are we going to have the bridge, we're going to have exactly the bridge that has been planned. It's not going to cost any less because we're not going to look at any measures that might save money on it. This is the bridge we're going to have. It would be like on personal finances, your family saying, Dad coming home one day, look guys, we're getting a Corvette. Just not an option. Well, honey, we have 3 kids, they're not going to fit in the Corvette. No, we're getting the Corvette. I'm open to some ideas. If anybody has further suggestions, I'm open to hearing them. Well, maybe we should get a car that is a little bit more suitable to our family. No, we're getting a Corvette. Could we get something that's maybe a little cheaper? Maybe even something that has the same horsepower, that is a sports car, but doesn't necessarily cost as much as the Corvette brand name. No, we're getting a Corvette. You see the issue here? Kay Ivey is not even open to the possibility that we might be able to come up with a different solution that's a little bit cheaper. That's the reason it's difficult to have a fruitful conversation with somebody that is so dead set on one solution. And she's like, well, we got to pay for it some way. Well, yeah, I mean, I see why your options are pretty limited if the only suggestion you're willing to hear is, let's figure out a different way to pay for this incredibly expensive bridge that I've already just decided we're doing. That's the issue with what Kay Ivey is going on right now. And I love how in this statement, Governor Ivey basically pretends to be some powerless bystander that doesn't have any other options. You're the freaking governor of the state. You act as though this thing has been laid in your lap and there's nothing you can do about it. You had nothing to do with the idea that this bridge was going to come along. Kay Ivey was one of the people spearheading this project. She acts as though that it just happened, that she wasn't in any way involved in it. It amazes me how politicians have this talent to pretend as though they're some kind of random bystanders, some kind of victim of circumstance when dealing with these tough issues, when normally, not always, but normally, the politician in question, like Kay Ivey is in this situation, is one of the ones that actually put the project together, and then it starts falling apart or people start having problems with it, and all of a sudden they act like somehow they had nothing to do with this whole thing coming together. Governor Ivey didn't have a good plan to pay for this bridge, and that's the issue. But I will say this. Governor Ivey's statement is not completely without merit, because she is right that there are a lot of people in the political sphere right now, and I know that we're going meta here a little bit, we're going to specifically get back to the bridge here in a second, but just the larger worldview part of this story. Governor Ivey is not wrong to suggest that there is a whole class in our political realm right now that wants all of the free stuff and just doesn't want to pay for it. I mean, we're seeing it with the Bernie crowd. They want free college, free healthcare, free everything. They just don't want to be the ones actually footing the bill. And when you tell them, look, these things aren't free, you're actually going to have to pay for them through taxes, then all of a sudden they say, no, just the rich people will take care of it. Which rich people? Those rich people. But even if you tax them at 100%, it still wouldn't fund this. Doesn't matter. They'll pay for it. It'll be fine. And granted, that attitude isn't quite as prevalent in the state of Alabama, but yeah, it exists, and Kay Ivey is not wrong to point that out. There are people in the state, just like every other state in the union, of people that want a whole lot of nice stuff and don't want to have to pay for it. Don't want to have to actually foot the bill or ask the tough questions of, okay, where are we going to get the money to pay for this thing? I'd be willing to bet that a large plurality, I wouldn't say a majority because I don't have the numbers on that, but there is probably a significant contingency of voters in the city of Mobile that really want the bridge and don't want to pay for it. They really like the bridge. The bridge would be a nice thing to have. They just want somebody other than them to actually foot the bill. Well, things cost money. And even though I disagree with Governor Ivey's application of this larger theme, the truth is she did at least hit the nail on the head on the overall feel and tenor of this. Now, I think that there's flaws in her argument, and I just pointed several of them out. But I'm saying that this larger problem that we do have with people just expecting free things to land in their lap and them not to have to give anything for it, that is actually a pretty significant problem in our political landscape. But here's the thing, too. Theoretically, I'm not even against the tolls. And I know that people are going to be furious at me, but hear me out. There's a reason that I'm saying this. If from the very beginning, the idea was, look, if we want a toll bridge in Mobile, that's fine. The people that are actually using the bridge are going to have to pay for it. I don't know why. Don't know why that's happening. But anyway, I don't know how many times I've turned this thing, programmed it to not do this during the show. All right, I apologize for that stupid interruption. So when it comes to this, why not just let the people in Mobile that are actually using it pay for it? Is that really so hard to comprehend? Now, the problem with the way that Kay Ivey is applying this idea is that we're also using state funds to pay for it. Why? Why should the state of Alabama be paying for a bridge that will be used primarily by the people of Mobile? That doesn't make any sense. And if the origin, as it were, of this idea were, let's just have the people of Mobile pay for it, state of Alabama has nothing to do with it, we're not going to put any money towards that, and if the voters of Mobile decide they do want the bridge bad enough that they're willing to pay the tolls, then we'll build it. If not, we do something else. If that's the approach that they were taking from this, I'd be fine with it. The problem is they're saying, nope, we're going to spend state money on it, even though a very small percentage of the population of Alabama is going to use it on a regular basis. Oh, and by the way, we're also going to pay the toll. We're also going to have a toll, even though you've already paid for the bridge in your taxes, we're also going to add another secondary tax for use. So they're just screwing everybody. They're screwing the people that are using it and the people in the state of Alabama that aren't using it all that often. They were using projects like this as an excuse to increase taxes on the people of Alabama. Not to use for things like this, not to use for infrastructure, so that they could use it themselves. As we told you back when we were having the debate about the 10-cent gas tax, already with the gas tax that we had, roughly six out of every 10 cents that was going to the gas tax was not being used on infrastructure projects. And yet they promised us They promised us that what was going to happen is that this money would specifically go to infrastructure, whether it be waterways, whether it be bridges, roads, whatever, that all of this money was specifically going to go to infrastructure. It would never be used for anything else, which is exactly what they told us the last time that they increased the gas tax. And turns out about 60% of what they were bringing in didn't wind up going to infrastructure. And how did they protect this measure? How did they make sure and solidify that this was not going to be used for anything other than infrastructure? They put a committee together. They didn't make it illegal. They just said, oh, we'll put a committee together. They'll hold us accountable. Yeah, why don't you make it against the law so that anybody that violates that law goes to prison? That might have a little bit stronger effect on whether or not somebody misuses these funds. But Kay Ivey added again, and she actually does address the fact that they hiked up our gas taxes by over 50%. She talks about this in the interview, which is amazing to me that this was even brought up, and she, with a straight face, didn't seem to sense the irony. She says, when we paid the gas tax, we only did 10 cents. It's a lot of money for some folks, but 10 cents only brings in $320 million annually for roads and bridges across the state. The bridge itself cost $2.1 billion. The gas tax is for statewide projects, not just one project. Now, numbers-wise, I appreciate that. I appreciate the governor's honesty in saying it's only going to raise this much money, it costs this much money, and that tax was supposed to be used for statewide projects, not just this one project here in the city of Mobile, which, by the way, is exactly why I said the tax was a dumb idea. These individual infrastructure projects should be taken care of at the local level by the people that are actually going to use them on a regular basis. And when it comes to this, maybe, and I know that this is a difficult concept for Kay Ivey especially, but other politicians as well, to wrap their head around this, maybe what we should have done, maybe we should just, figure out a way to pay for things before we jump into them. Maybe that should be the standard from here on out. That instead of just building crap or putting together plans to build crap and saying, we'll figure out how to pay for it at some point. Yeah, that doesn't work. And this is another shining example of it. They got the absolute worst, they got the worst of both scenarios. They're taxing the whole state, and they're taxing the individuals that are crossing it. They're taking 2 bites of the apple. And so they did this saying, once we do this, it'll be great. There'll be no infrastructure problems in Alabama. Everything will be sunshine and roses if we just pass this 60% increase to your gas taxes. I think it was actually like 58%. It's somewhere in that area. It was a 10 cents gas hike. If you just do this, then we'll have no other problems. And then they have to come back to you just a couple months later and say, yeah, we're going to need more money. This is just so stereotypical of what happens in the state of Alabama. They tell you that they've got to raise your taxes. And then when they actually do, they come back and say, yeah, we're going to have to raise them again. I didn't expect the turnaround to be quite this fast, but unfortunately it is. They're taxing you now, and then they're going to tax you later as well. So Governor Ivey is not the only person that spoke out about this today. Interestingly enough, her lieutenant governor, Will Ainsworth, gave a very different statement and issued that today. Let's take a look.
I'm Lieutenant Governor Will Ainsworth, and I hold one of 9 seats on the Alabama Toll Road and Bridge Authority. For the last several months, I've followed the proposed toll on the Bayway Bridge project, and quite frankly, I found it to violate every conservative belief and principle that I hold. The $90 monthly toll that ALDOT has proposed for the Bayway Bridge would cost a 2-parent working family almost $2,200 a year just to drive to work. That's $2,200 a year that could be used for groceries, school clothes, utilities, mortgage payments, or countless other basic needs. The plan to toll the Wallace Tunnel, which has been completely paid off and toll-free for decades, makes an already outrageous situation even worse. Families that cannot afford the tolls will be forced to drive miles out of the way, which raises their already high fuel costs or forces them to be held hostage in their home county because of simple economics. For these reasons, I'm announcing today my firm opposition to the toll project. If it comes before the Alabama Toll Road and Bridge Authority, I'll be proudly casting a no vote and standing with the hardworking families of Baldwin and Mobile counties. A state that built rockets that sent man to the moon should be able to find a way to build a bridge without extorting the citizens it seeks to serve. I invite you to join me in finding a solution that embraces our conservative beliefs.
Well, thank you, Will Ainsworth. Finally, somebody actually standing up for the things that they said that they were going to run on. Low taxes, low spending. And I get that, it's politically feasible. He's probably going to get some brownie points for this. Maybe that is his motivation. I don't know. But it seems to me in my dealings with the lieutenant governor and based on what he just said there, he actually does believe in the conservative principles. He actually does think that it's absurd to ask Alabama families to pay this exorbitant amount. Why don't we come up with something simpler, something that's not going to be nearly as big or expensive? That's really what we've got to focus on here. And if you want to go real conservative, and Will Ainsworth didn't even suggest this is coming from Caleb, you want to go real conservative, go to the county and the city that is actually going to use it. Have the people there in the community pay for it. And if they can't pay for it, it's obvious they don't need it that bad. Or have a private company take care of it. Because here's the thing, no private company would go into a project saying, yep, we're going to charge $6. Do you know why? Because they know that nobody would pay it. If they thought that they could get people to pay it, sure, they'd build it. If they thought it would turn a profit. But the reason that they are not going to do that is because they will do a cost versus benefit analysis. And if they determine that the cost is going to exceed the money that they're going to get back, they don't build that project. I know that's a foreign concept to people in the government, but that's the way that a private industry works. That if you see a project and you are pretty certain that it's going to hemorrhage money, or that you would have to charge a toll that is so exorbitant that nobody would actually pay for it, then you don't build the bridge. Now, that's not to say that private business always predicts it perfectly or that they never have projects that bust. I'm not saying that. But the difference is when it comes to government and government being on the hook for something, they don't do that cost-benefit analysis. They're trying to break even, but they don't just, in government, they'll just go ahead with the project and finish it without actually really considering the cost or coming up with a good explanation for how they're going to turn a profit or even break even within a certain number of years. So I do appreciate Will Ainsworth for making a stand. I will say, because it's tactics and we observe the rules of debate here, I do have to be a little bit critical because the man on the moon thing is a red herring fallacy. Landing somebody on the moon has nothing to do with being able to pay for a bridge. I mean, I get the point. And I understand that he's just hearkening back to something that is a source of Alabama pride and should be. But at the same time, not really relevant to the discussion we're having. So I got to call Will Ainsworth out, at least for that one. But Kay Ivey has shown herself to be a socially conservative, and she is socially conservative, but she is a socially conservative Dixiecrat. She loves taxes and loves spending and loves these big projects that she can look back and say, yep, I did that one. Look at me. I'm awesome. That's who Kay Ivey is. She loves taxing and loves spending. And if you're ever saying, well, Caleb, I don't know if that's really fair. Oh, really? Can you think of a single spending or taxing measure that Kay Ivey did not approve of? And I'm not even just talking about her career as a governor. I mean, seriously, look back. Kay Ivey is not all bad. Don't get me wrong. She's very socially conservative. She's been great on the abortion ban thing. There are several things that I like about Kay Ivey, but I said at the time she was the least conservative out of all the Republicans running for governor. And this is just further proof of that. Yes, she's socially conservative, and I like that about her. But dang it, she loves some taxing and spending. Never seen a tax or a government project that she didn't like. But let's move on to something else. You may have heard the other day that the ACLU is moving forward with the case on the abortion bans. Now, this surprised literally no one. Everybody knew that the ACLU was going to move forward on it. In fact, the people that put it together, Terry Collins, for example, who was the sponsor of the bill in the House, the organization that she worked with, Eagle Forum Alabama, who we talked to about it, every single one of them was fully expecting the ACLU to have something ready and raring to go the second that it passed. And they were right. I don't think it was even 24 hours before the ACLU filed suit. So this is no surprise to anyone. And the ACLU did respond to Attorney General Marshall's defense of the abortion ban here in the state of Alabama. And this was their defense. This was their response to Marshall's defense. Alabamians must not be forced to relitigate their settled constitutional rights every time the state of Alabama knowingly and deliberately enacts an unconstitutional abortion law. All right, so there are so many things, so many directions you could go with that statement talking about the constitutionality or unconstitutionality or the relitigating. But here's what it boils down to. What they are trying to say, in layman's terms, is the people of Alabama have to go through this every now and then, that we pass some kind of anti-abortion law, and then the higher court smack it down. And you shouldn't have to pay for it, and we shouldn't have to go through this spectacle. That's their side of the argument. That's what they're saying. I want to make very clear that's not my side of the argument. That's what they're saying here. But here's the thing. The reason that this happens every so often is not because some fat cats that are out of touch with Alabama are creating these laws. Does that happen occasionally? Yes, but not on abortion. And here's why. The people in Alabama know, and the politicians in Alabama know, that the anti-abortion sentiment in the state of Alabama is strong. In fact, the only state that has a slightly higher disapproval rating of abortion is Mississippi, and it's only by 1 percentage point. So out of all 50 states, we're literally second when it comes to being anti-abortion. The second most pro-life state in the union. And this is what Alabama voters want in their politicians. Goodness knows we don't always get what we want when it comes to politicians. Anybody that's paid any attention to Alabama politics is far, far too aware of that to make that case. But on this is something the people of Alabama actually want. They're saying, well, the people of Alabama shouldn't have to relitigate their... Yeah, we want that. We want to have this fight. There was an overwhelming groundswell of support for the Alabama abortion ban in the state of Alabama. I get that a bunch of elitists that the ACLU hangs out with in New York and California didn't like it, but in Alabama we did. 58%, according to a 2014 Pew poll in the state of Alabama, 58% of people in Alabama think that abortion should be outlawed in all or most cases, which this law effectively does. And here's the thing, it's probably higher now. Because if you're looking at, nationally speaking, overall, the pro-life movement has actually gotten better. Steam has been picked up substantially when it comes to the pro-life movement, the March for Life, so on and so forth, nationwide. And so it would make sense that in the state of Alabama, that trend has also continued here. So in the past 5 years, it's probably actually over 60%, if I had to guess. But this is what we're dealing with. The people of Alabama wanted their elected officials to do this. This isn't something that the government is tyrannically victimizing us. This is exactly what we wanted. And for the ACLU to stand up on their pedestal on high, waggling their finger at us saying, well, you shouldn't have to do this. We're not going to be upset at our elected officials, the majority of us at least. for doing this because this is what we put them in office to do. This is the reason that they were elected, to do stuff like this. And the fact that they actually wound up passing this abortion ban, look, just last year, there was a constitutional amendment to recognize the life of the person in the womb, and it passed overwhelmingly, wasn't even close, in the state of Alabama. So the ACLU can pretend as though they're fighting for the people of Alabama, but it's a load of crap. And anybody that's looking at the numbers understands that. They also claimed in this same statement, they also said that before viability, the state's interests are not strong enough to support a prohibition of abortion. So technically, they are right in the sense of the legal jargon that they're using here, because they're saying that the court has reaffirmed this over and over again, that viability is the standard. Now, I've done several videos on this before, why viability doesn't make any sense. It's a moving target. It would make certain people's life in certain places more valuable than others, or valuable at different times. And it really doesn't pass the logical smell test. But this is what the ACLU is trying to do. This is the reason they are presenting the argument in this very specific way. The truth is, they're not concerned about the people of Alabama, nor are they concerned about the cost to the Alabama taxpayer. They're wanting you to back down. They're worried about how much it's going to cost them. They're worried about how it is going to reflect on them. They're asking you to give up the fight before it starts. This is like a schoolyard bully that all of a sudden he sees that the guy that he picks on is starting to stand up for himself. And before the first punch is thrown, the bully is trying to talk him out of fighting him. That's what's going on here. He's saying, no, you don't want to fight me. Look, I'm so much bigger than you. I'm so much stronger than you. It's really going to hurt. It's just too much trouble. The bully is saying that because he doesn't want to fight himself. Because if he did, the bully would just go over and punch you. He doesn't want to do that. And so if he's trying to talk you out of fighting, the reason he's doing so is because he has something to lose. And that's what's going on with the ALCU right now. They are terrified that this thing is going to go to the Supreme Court and overturn Roe v. Wade. That's why they're scared. That's why they're trying to convince you that it's not worth your trouble, that it's just going to cost money, that it's not going to help you out. They are trying to talk you out of fighting. And this actually goes hand in hand with another story that comes from Tennessee, our neighbors to the north. You see, earlier today, in the Tennessee legislature, the National Right to Life attorney, a guy named Jim Bopp, been the National Right to Life for a long time now, he went and testified before the Tennessee legislature, actually encouraging them not to pursue overturning Roe with the lawsuit that they have. Now, Tennessee has a heartbeat bill, so theirs isn't quite as strong. It's not a full-on abortion ban like Alabama's is. But the guy who actually works for National Right to Life is trying to convince pro-life members of the House in the state of Tennessee that they should not fight Roe v. Wade. It's absolutely astounding. Take a look.
Well, what do we know about the current Supreme Court? Well, we know one justice has said anywhere in writing or in a judicial opinion that Roe v. Wade was wrongly decided and that he would overturn it. What do we know about, we know there are 4 justices who have already voted to reaffirm Roe v. Wade and have given the chance they would redefine Roe v. Wade as gender discrimination so that every single regulation that touches abortion, conscience clauses, funding, you name it, will be declared unconstitutional. And then we have 4 justices who we believe from their general judicial philosophy might be willing, or should be willing even, to consider an argument that Roe v. Wade is wrongly decided. But what other evidence do we have? But that's all we know. There is no objective evidence that we have more than one vote to overturn Roe v. Wade. Now, how do we get a willing court? If we're really not sure, and we should never stop when we're not sure that we have a willing court, this is too important. We need to make sure we build a willing court. How do we do that? We reelect President Trump, and we reelect a majority in the Senate. That is it. That's how we build a willing court. So it's still, in that sense, a political question.
So there's Jim Bopp suggesting to members of, I said the House earlier, I think that's actually the Senate, but suggesting there that they should not fight Roe v. Wade, that they should just back off until it's a sure thing, until they absolutely know for a fact, beyond the shadow of a doubt, that they have justices that are going to completely overturn Roe v. Wade, which is one of the dumbest arguments I've ever heard. I mean, if we're talking about a football game, for example, would you say, well, we don't really need to play any games unless we're pretty 100% sure that we're going to win? Because first of all, you don't always know when you're going to win. I mean, for goodness sake, back when Saban first got there, Alabama lost to La Mo. It happens sometimes. It's weird, but it happens. And what we're looking at right now, that just because we're not 100% sure that there is no doubt whatsoever that the court would overturn Roe v. Wade, look, we're not going to know that for sure. We're just not. I'd like to think that we should. We ought to have a court that all 9 justices say, nope, you can't kill a child in the womb. It's against the law. It should be against the law. It's been against the law in this country since its inception. There is no reason to believe that the person in the womb is not a human being. I wish we had a court like that. But we have to deal with the way that things are, not as we wish them to be. I would love to have that court, but that's not the court we have, and we're never going to have that. Especially when you consider that the justices do not reveal their personal stances on this. Neil Gorsuch, who I believe is a very strong advocate for life, even he would not say openly that, oh, Roe v. Wade ought to be overturned. Now, we had strong evidence to believe that he would, but we didn't know that for a fact. We didn't have him explicitly stating that. And so if we wait for it to be a sure thing, it's never going to be overturned. And a guy like Jim Bopp, look, I'm all for having a plan when you go into a fight. Literally the entire theme of my show revolves around it. Tactics. Where you're supposed to have a plan ahead of time before you enter into some kind of political discussion. I'm all in favor of having a plan. But this goes beyond having a plan into you don't enter a fight unless you're 100% sure that you're going to win. Why would he say that? Because he doesn't want you to enter the fight. I contrast that with the ACLU's response. They're the bully on the other side convincing you it's not worth it to fight. We've got people, turncoats, inside the movement, even inside the National Right to Life, trying to convince you the fight's not worth it. It's just not. Lay down. There's no reason for you to get up. There's no reason for you to get riled up. Just give up. Don't worry. We'll handle it. That's what they're saying to you. And you heard him at the end of that. You heard he gave the answer for why he's saying that. I don't have to answer the question. He answered the question. He said, this is a political question. Jim Bopp has shown his hand. National Right to Life, at least from his perspective, is not about saving the children. It's not about ending abortion. It is about being a fundraising tool of the GOP. That's all it is. This conversation, I get, is going to make some people uncomfortable. But it's the truth. And National Right to Life does some good things. But primarily, their job is to get Republicans elected. And there's the proof of it. He said, well, how are we going to fix this? How are we going to make sure that we have a willing court that might overturn Roe v. Wade? Well, the only way that we can do that is to elect people to the Senate and elect President Trump again. We're fighting for the lives of children, and that's what you're worried about. I mean, I'm not saying that's not important, but it shouldn't be the primary goal. And that's what it seems to be. This is the same tired line the GOP has used forever. You remember back when it was Obamacare. They said, we can't do anything about Obamacare. We only have the House. The House is all we've got. You know, if you really want to get rid of Obamacare, you got to give us the Senate too. So we gave them the Senate, and they said, look, the guy who the bill is named after is in the White House. You can't expect him to sign it over. If you want to get rid of Obamacare, you got to give us the White House. And so we did. We gave them the House, the Senate, and the White House. And what did they do with that? Once they had it, they said, yeah, the thing is, there's an election coming up, and we don't want to be scary to a lot of those middle-of-the-road voters, and we might strip out the mandate. We may change the name of Obamacare, but that's really about all we're going to do. What was the purpose of electing you people if that's all you're going to do? And National Right to Life is falling into that same old tired way of thinking. That the only way that you're going to get this overturned is you have to vote for us and give us money. You don't need to fight yourself. You need to let the experts handle that. You're not smart enough to take this problem on yourself. You need to let the experts handle that. And thankfully, we're the experts, and we're more than willing to take your votes and money. That's essentially what Jim Bopp just said. And it's sad, but it reveals that to many at the top level of this, it's not about the babies. It's about getting people with an R behind their name in office. And here's what's really sad. There are probably people in that same movement that would actually be upset if Roe v. Wade were overturned. Why? Because it's their cash cow. There are people in the GOP that only care about getting reelected, and it's not a small number of them, unfortunately. That they don't really care about the children, but they know that they can go to an evangelical voter and say, look, you're going to vote for that guy? He's in favor of genocide of children. You got to vote for me, or else it's never going to go away. But here's the thing, that promise only works as long as abortion is still legal. If that goes away, they no longer know for sure where your vote is going to go. They no longer have you over a barrel. And so there are a lot of people in the GOP that, to be honest, the thought of Roe v. Wade being overturned terrifies them because they know your vote is no longer a sure thing for them. Now, granted, the Democrats put themselves in that position by making themselves the party of child sacrifice, which makes no sense. But they put themselves in that situation to where a lot of those votes are basically guaranteed to go to the Republicans because if you're talking about a one-issue vote, the right to life needs to be it. I mean, the right to exist is kind of where all of your other rights come from. Dead people don't have rights, so that's kind of the main one. And because they understand that that makes a lot of single-issue voters, and on that I don't have a problem being a single-issue voter, they know that they have a dependable voting bloc that can go right in and they can just say, yep, well, I'm against abortion. So there, I win your vote. If they no longer have that, they are terrified at having to curry somebody's vote. This is the one thing that they have to get, especially that evangelical voting bloc. It's the only thing in their arsenal that they know is keeping you from even considering somebody else. And that's why they're afraid. So then we come down to the question, why now? Why is it only now that the National Right to Life and Jim Bopp are bringing this out? Because they would have never said this a year ago, 2 years ago. They had every opportunity to. They've been around for a long time. They never have. Why now because they're running scared. In this past year, we have had a cascade of anti-abortion sentiment well up, which I have not seen in my lifetime, and people much older than me have not seen in their lifetime. We had several states adopt heartbeat bills. We had places like here in Alabama adopting full-on anti-abortion, a full abortion ban. You have even more extreme than the heartbeat bills. You have the one coming out of Georgia, for example. You have different states considering bills to offer and extend the right to life, the definition of personhood, being considered in various state houses. You see, they're afraid that you're no longer going to need them. Because for 50 years, people have been trying to fight this on the national level with very little luck. Very little success. I mean, we're still one of only, I think, 7 countries that abortion up until the point of birth is even possible at the federal level. And so you have people like Jim Bopp saying, no, calm down. We'll take care of it. Everything's being handled. And then you've got people like myself and other people that actually do care about the children and actually we're thinking, hey, we're actually here to save lives, not win a political debate. Or looking at this guy and saying, screw you. You've had 50 freaking years to do this and have done nothing. It's time for us to rise up. It is time for us to get off our butts and actually take this fight to them. And if we have to do it through the state legislatures, so be it. And that's why I'm proud of my state for being the only one to institute a full-on abortion ban. I get that it hasn't been implemented yet. I understand that this isn't the end of the fight, it's the beginning. I'm not saying that the fight is over. I'm saying the exact opposite. But I'm saying I am proud that we are finally actually trying to have the fight. Because it felt like for the vast majority of my lifetime, we were going through that asleep. That most people were not willing to actually have that discussion or have that fight. And I'm thrilled that it's actually happening. You see, what's so sad is that for the vast majority of my lifetime, this really felt like what happens in a lot of churches, where they kind of outsource their ministry to other people. Where they essentially say, well, we don't do mission work because we have a guy for that. It drives me crazy that I've even heard some congregations refer to their preacher, their pulpit minister, as their evangelist. It's like, no, you're a Christian. You're all evangelist. What is going on now is we are in the time of Haggai. And to explain what I mean, I'll go ahead and pull this Bible verse up. This is Haggai 1, 2 through 5. Thus says the Lord of hosts, the people says, the time has not come, the time for the house of the Lord to be rebuilt. Then the word of the Lord came by Haggai the prophet, saying, is it time for you yourselves to dwell in your paneled houses, while this house lies desolate? Now therefore, thus says the Lord of hosts, consider your ways. To completely understand what's going on there in Haggai, the temple of the Lord had been destroyed when Jerusalem was sacked, and it was lying in ruins. And then people started coming back. The exile was over. People were coming back to Jerusalem. They were building back their communities. And they were like, yeah, we'll get to building the temple at some point. And then a few more years passed. Yeah, we'll get to building the temple at some point. And by this point, all the communities have been rebuilt. The streets have been rebuilt. And the scripture, they're even living in paneled houses. Life was good. They had resettled Jerusalem. They were back. And they were so worried about their own comfort, they had ignored doing God's work. God had blessed them with returning to their homeland, and they thank him by leaving his house of worship in ruins while they worked on their own. I'm glad to say, finally, it seems as though Christians in this country have taken on the call of Haggai. That they have gotten off their butts and decided this is a fight worth having. That Let's quit worrying about our own comfort or whether people are going to say that we're anti-woman or whatever else they're going to say. This is a fight worth having. These children's lives are more important than our own comfort. And because people have finally said that, you've got the rats like Jim Bopp finally coming out of the woodwork and showing their cards. Saying, yeah, we really are just a fundraising arm for the GOP. Our primary goal is not to get Roe v. Wade overturned, not to save the lives of children, but to get money and votes for Republicans. It's our action and us taking it to our state legislatures and lawmakers saying no more that has finally got them to have to show their hand. And they're scared to death. And they should be. Because for years they have been fundraising, trying to convince you that they're doing everything that they can to save these children's lives and have done essentially nothing for 50 years. And it's a shame on us for our inaction, and it's a shame on them for fundraising off of the death of children while doing nothing about it. So all I have to say to this is, well done, brothers. Well done. We're finally getting something done. We have finally started laying the foundation. The temple is about to be rebuilt. Good job, guys. Keep it up. We'll go to a break. We'll be back in just a second.
And now for a reading from the Social Justice Warrior Bible with Pastor Gregory Post.
Welcome in. I'm Gregory Post, head pastor at the Eternal Living Word Trans-Denominational Community Church and Coffee House in Novato, California. Now it's time for a reading from the SJW Bible. Today's reading will come from Leviticus chapter 10, verses 1 through 10. Now Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, took their respective fire pans, and after putting the fire in them, placed incense on it and offered strange fire before the Lord, which he had not commanded them. And the fire came out of the presence of the Lord, which created a wicked cool light show for them to see, and totally got everyone feeling the Spirit's presence. Then Moses said to Aaron, "It is what the Lord spoke, saying, even though I didn't command you to use this strange fire, I totally understand your need to express yourselves in worship and keep yourselves entertained." So Aaron therefore danced and yelled with joy, knowing that his sons were having a good time at worship. Moses called out to Mishael and Ezaphan, and the son of Aaron's uncle Uzziel, and said to them, "Come forward, carry your relatives away in front of the sanctuary outside of the camp, for they have fainted from being overwhelmed by the power of God's coolness." So they came forward and carried them still in their tunics outside the camp, as Moses had said. Then Moses said to Aaron and his sons Eleazar and Ithamar, "Do not uncover your heads, nor tear your clothes, because God wants us to always be happy, and as long as we're happy, He's happy. Therefore, if worship doesn't give you an overwhelming sense of euphoria, you need to find another congregation, preferably one with a more dynamic pastor and band." So they did according to the word of Moses. And the Lord spoke to Aaron, saying, "Do not drink wine or strong drink, neither you nor your sons with you, when you come into the sanctuary, so that you will be able to drink more once you arrive. It is a perpetual statute throughout your generations. And so as to make a distinction between the holy and the profane, between the unclean and the clean, because when worship stops being fun or feels judgy, then it becomes profane and unclean." Wow, so inspiring. This has been a reading from the SJW Bible. And remember, the only truth that matters is your truth.
That was stupid.
I know it was stupid.
Really stupid.
Hey, I just said it was stupid.
Welcome back, and today's Daily Dose of Stupid. This one is pretty good. It's from OkCupid. Now, for those of you who don't know what OkCupid is, it's a dating site. But they're also very, very far to the left, and this is a tweet that they put out earlier I think it was the other day, and it actually does have to do with what we were talking about, abortion. Girls don't want flowers and chocolates. Girls want, okay, I'm just done with the clap thing, want someone who supports reproductive rights. So, first of all, I would already be perturbed even if the message that they were giving was not pro-abortion, because they violated two huge internet etiquette rules. And I say this to everybody within the sound of my voice. Please don't type in all caps for any reason. I don't care if it's for emphasis. There is no reason for anyone to ever type in all caps. It looks stupid, and I gotta say, anybody that types in all caps, I don't read it. I don't care what it's about. If I see it in all caps, I just ignore it. And the clappy hands thing, what are you, a 13-year-old girl? You don't need emojis every 10 seconds, much less every other word. It's hard for me to take anybody seriously that has the all caps or the clappy hands. I only got turned on to this tweet because I had a friend that was asking me about it. So I would not have even read it with the clappy hands thing if it hadn't been for that. So let's actually get into the substance of what they were saying, that men should be people that, women should be primarily concerned with not whether a guy buys her flowers or chocolates, but what women really like is a guy that supports abortion. Yeah, you can tell by looking at me that I'm not exactly an expert on women, but I do know this about them. And I feel absolutely confident in saying this. There is absolutely no hesitation to say something when nine times out of 10, whenever I'm talking about women, I always say, take this with a grain of salt. I know nothing about women. But this one I'm pretty confident in. I'm pretty sure women really don't like being treated as though they are a homogenous group. In other words, that all women are the same and think exactly alike, which is exactly what this tweet is suggesting. I would counter this tweet by saying what women really like is a guy that's pro-life. Even though I think women ought to like a guy that is pro-life. I think it's hilarious that the left constantly. Women are not a homogenous group that you can just say, well, they're all in favor of this and they all like guys that are pro-choice. Couple of things to debunk that. First of all, OkCupid is way off base just looking at the numbers, because if you look at the statistics that were done by the Guttmuncher Institute, which, by the way, is a radical pro-abortion organization, they did surveys which spanned countries, not just in America. They looked all over the globe. And you know what they found about the approval ratings of abortion? That they're not significantly different between men and women. Now, they vary greatly between the countries themselves, but as far as the men versus the women in each country, they did not find a significant difference in women versus men. And so you don't have, that's actually not true. That not only are women not a homogenous group of people that all believe in abortion, it's just those evil, hateful men that are against abortion, but actually what they found is, no matter where you are in the world, that is something that does not hold true. So OkCupid, first of all, got their facts completely wrong. But let's even look at it at a deeper level. Ladies, again, I don't know that much about relationships, but think about the kind of men that you have known in your life that are pro-abortion and the ones that are anti-abortion. Which one would you rather have? Because you know who really likes abortion? I mean, that are men. The guys who really, really like abortion are the ones that want to have sex as much as possible and not bury. It's actually really terrible guys that are usually in favor of abortion. Usually men that, forgive my language here, but this is the truth, how they view women. It's those guys that really like abortion because they can have as much sex as they want without any commitment, that if they are going to do that with a woman, it's going to be within the confines of marriage, and any children that result from that, they will raise as a family together because they take responsibility for what they do. So as a general rule, I'm not even saying that pro-life versus pro-choice is the primary considering factor, but the type of man that is pro-life, more often than not, is the kind of man that a woman would actually want versus the men that are typically pro-choice. And that's just a fact. There are women that probably would prefer a man that's pro-choice, women that are on the left, but I believe that they do so in error. And if you look at the kind of guy that typically is pro-choice and the reasons that they are, the math bears that out as well. Let's go to the chaplain's report.
In 1775, the Continental Congress created the Chaplain Corps. Under the command of General George Washington, each soldier was required to attend worship service every Sunday. While other armies advanced on their feet, Washington's troops advanced on their knees. It's time for the Chaplain's Report with Caleb Colquitt on tactics.
Based on the segment before that last one, I feel like I've already done a chaplain's report, but we're going to do this one anyway. This one comes from the book of Micah, and it's important to understand that at this point in Micah's history, he really does hit on something that I think all of us can relate to. He's experienced despair, both on a personal level, and Israel itself has been experiencing despair. And in response to this, this is sort of Micah's advice, his 2 cents on the situation and how it ought to be handled. So this is Micah 7, 5 through 7. Do not trust in a neighbor. Do not have confidence in a friend. From her who lies in your bosom, guard your lips. For son treats father contemptuously. Daughter rises up against her mother. Daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law. A man's enemies are the men of his own household. But as for me, I will watch expectantly for the Lord. I will wait for the God of my salvation. My God will hear me. And it actually does go along with what we were talking about earlier. There were so many considerations about, well, we need to have this fight, this spiritual battle, only when we know that all the cards are going to be stacked in our favor and there's no risk whatsoever. That's not what the Bible says at all. In fact, the Bible encourages people to go into a fight, to engage in things that they are unlikely to emerge victoriously with a full faith and confidence in God. In this passage in Micah, Micah is saying, I'm not putting my faith in people because people are flawed. And Micah is including himself in that. He's saying that even sons and fathers don't treat each other well all the time. He says to even guard your lips from the one whose head is in your bosom. In other words, your even lovers, daughters, fathers, neighbors, all of them, the people that you're closest to. Is he saying never trust anybody? No, that's not what Micah is saying at all. In fact, if you look through the biblical narrative, both Old and New Testament, there is a strong emphasis on community, especially a community of faith. But what he's saying is all of that pales in comparison to trusting in God. Isn't that exactly what Jesus said? He said, this is a person that brought people together, that encouraged others to find a community of faith, find that spiritual family of believers, but also warned that he was going to separate father from son and daughter from mother. People were going to say, I brought peace, but I bring a sword. And he said, unless you hate your father or your mother, you're not worthy of me. Let's not misread that. He wasn't saying that you should never trust in anybody or you cannot confide in or rely on anybody. He's saying that when you compare that to the reliance that you should have on God, there's no comparison. And that's exactly the sentiment that Micah is reflecting here. He's saying even the men of your own household are not necessarily reliable in comparison to God. And when it comes to the big things, we wait for the God of our salvation. We have faith that he is going to deliver us. And I love the closing line of that passage. My God will hear me. if we are faithful, we are loyal, we have the kind of trust in God that Micah describes in that passage, then we are confident God will hear us. Now, maybe he doesn't always answer us right away. Maybe he doesn't answer us in the way that we would like. But we can have confidence that 100% of the time, if we are faithful to God, if we are honestly seeking him, that our God will hear us. And that we should put our trust in him, not other flawed individuals, not human beings. God is the only one worthy of that kind of trust. Stay the course, friends.
Tactics is a production of News Radio 1440 and Cumulus Media Montgomery. Any opinions expressed on this program are those of the host and do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Cumulus Media. The theme song for Tactics is 6 Foot Town by Big and Rich. Graphics by Jessica Dawson. Broadcast studios provided by Cumulus Media Montgomery. Location studios provided by the Dalraida Church of Christ. Copyright 2019.